Okay.
Thanks,
Senator
Chair.
Ludlam.
Look, I want to concentrate a bit on an area that doesn't seem to have had a great deal of exposure, considering that it will comprise just under 30% of the rollout. You didn't mention the HFC network in your opening statement, as far as I could tell, Mr. Roux. It's barely glanced on in the updated corporate plan. In fact, I think I could find about 3 references to it. So I just want to focus on that. Can you update us on the status of any HFC cable trials that you've got underway? And maybe just start with a big picture. Where is that section of the network sit at the moment?
Yeah, thank you, Senator, for your question. I can give you the big picture, and I think that Mr. Adcock can give you any technical details or add to my answer. But we're obviously in early stages of planning HFC centres, and we clearly don't have access to any HFC networks at this stage. We are certainly very focused on matters like IT, product development, how we will do the lead-in MDU programme supply chain. We would like to be in a position to launch HFC as soon as we can, clearly. But at the moment, we're still in discussions with various players, including Telstra and Optus. You will be aware that we have appointed an executive, Dennis Steiger, to head up this area, and he has great experience in running and building HFC networks overseas.
Before we go too much further, and I suspect Senator Conroy might agree, can we put our request on the record that that officer attend either the next budget estimate session or the next select committee hearing, whichever comes first?
Yeah, we will take that.
Thanks.
We'll take that on notice.
Yeah, that's right.
No, you don't need to take it on notice. You can say yes, he'll come.
We're formally requesting.
No, we take your formal request. Mr. Adcock, would you like to add to anything else?
Just building on what Mr. Roux said, clearly we're in discussions with both the asset owners at the moment in negotiations. So as that progresses, there are requests in the market for expertise coming in around the head-end equipment. That's in the procurement discussion process at the moment. And the sort of plan is being finalised subject to the successful negotiations with the asset owners.
Can you provide us, maybe on notice, with an accurate set of maps of exactly what the footprint of the 2 HFC networks is? Because it's actually remarkably difficult to find.
We could take it on notice, Senator, and absolutely. We have to check. We have been provided some information as part of the negotiations.
I would hope so.
Yeah, absolutely.
You've been at it for a year.
But I am not personally aware of the confidentiality provisions, but to the extent we can, I'll take it on notice to get what we have to you to the extent we can.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I can't imagine that the footprint is likely to be commercial in confidence. I mean, you can see the cables down on the streets.
I agree, but as you've just articulated yourself, it's very difficult.
Too, but Telstra won't give you a map.
It's getting very difficult. You said yourself it's difficult to get the information, and as we've gone through the process, I'm not saying it's being difficult, but validating the accuracy of the
make that somewhat of an obsolete position.
If you're able to provide us with those maps and or document the difficulty you have in finding them, if it's not possible to provide them to the committee, I'd really appreciate it. Have you got access to any part of the HFC cable networks operated by either player for the purposes of trials or
not at this point. Not at this point.
Seriously. So how far have you been able to progress? Your revised corporate plan says 20% of the final network will be under the HFC footprint. And you haven't even opened the box. You don't have access to any of that gear yet.
Senator, can the source of the 20%, please?
27% is on page 13 of your revised corporate plan.
The current corporate?
Of the current corporate plans?
No, end of rollout percent of total 27%. Fibre to the premises 25, fibre to the node 29, HFC 27. It's a really, really big piece of your pie chart, and you don't have access to any of that gear yet.
We don't have access to the network at this stage.
Okay. When do you expect to start commercial operations over those networks?
Well, Senator, that depends upon the timing, clearly, of the negotiations with the owners of those assets.
All right.
and also various regulatory clearances that will be needed post those.
Do you want to just describe, because I don't know that we've gone into this in much detail in the past, just describe what those regulatory arrangements are going to have to look like? Are you negotiating, first of all, to purchase those assets from Telstra and Optus, or lease them, or some other kind of arrangement?
Sandra, I'm sorry, but those negotiations are still ongoing, and we're not in a position to comment on that.
It can't be a complete black box a year in. That's insane. I mean, without going into details about pricing or specifics, you must be able to give us some outlines.
Well, I'm sorry, Sandra, whilst those negotiations are still pending, we're not in a position to comment.
Are you anticipating that you close those negotiations out this year? This calendar year?
We would be hopeful that we can close those negotiations out this year, yes, as Mr. Morrow has been on the record of saying at our first quarter results. But then post that, clearly there is various regulatory clearances that need to be obtained.
All right, just describe for us what they are. I think I preempted your answer to that question before.
Well, obviously the ACCC regulatory body will want to look at the agreement, Senator, and clear them.
Do you want to just tell us what the final shape is likely to look like in terms of what the ACCC will provide you with, what they're going to be looking for?
The ACCC will review the agreements when they're done, and they will review them for competition policy, and they will give what the form of the clearance is, I don't know, but they'll give us presumably a letter of some sort.
I'm presuming you can confirm that you are in negotiations to gain access to both networks, not just Telstra's.
Yes, Senator.
Yeah. And is it still anticipated that NBNco will either, you're taking control of those networks either on the basis of a lease or you're taking ownership of those networks, that you will be providing, that you will be the sole wholesale operator of those assets, and then you'll be providing open access to retail players over those networks?
That's correct.
That's still correct, okay. Are you proposing to integrate the network infrastructure of the two separate networks?
Mr. Adcock.
Sorry, I was just reading an email. My apologies, Senator.
That's okay. Are you proposing to integrate the network infrastructure and the back office stuff of those two separate networks?
Yes.
You are, okay. Who will operate the operational and the business support systems that will underpin those networks? Are you going to have to rebuild those from scratch?
That's still one of the considerations that are part of the negotiations at the moment.
Okay, we don't know yet. And can you just, from a really basic technical point of view, what is involved in terms of physical technology to be installed in converting an HFC network designed to deliver television one way into the kind of product that you will need to offer RSPs?
Part of the RFI that's in the market at the moment is working with the vendor community to get a firm understanding of the advances that have been made since the deployment of both the networks and what will be required in both the head-end equipment and the external plant to make that transition. And as I understand the feedback I've got in the summary is that the early results are very positive. And both the current asset owners are looking at what they need to do to the networks to enable that as well.
Okay. But I'm no clearer as to what it looks like, and I gather it's a fast-moving field of technology and so on. But what actually needs to be installed to convert it from a network to deliver pay TV to a network to deliver two-way broadband services? What do you have to physically install?
Look, Senator, without diving deep into the technical detail, because as the Senator said, we will take that on notice, but the basic premise is that there is CMTS equipment that needs to be upgraded in the exchange.
Just go easy on the acronyms.
Cable modem termination systems, head-end equipment need to be installed in the exchanges, and then there is DOCSIS 3 allows open access to.
And what gets installed at the customer end?
That would be in most cases, a new gateway.
Okay. So it's still quite a labour-intensive process. It's not just that you buy those networks and switch them on and away you go. You've got to upgrade the exchanges, and you've got to upgrade
There
each
is
one
an
of the
upgrade
customers?
path, yes.
Yep.
I think fair to comment on the labour. The big benefit is that the lead-ins that are there
Are already there.
do not have to be rerun.
Yep. So it's some kind of terminated device at the household end, and it's exchange upgrades at that end.
I also understand, and I'm happy to be corrected, but some of the, again, customer premise equipment that is deployed under the network elements that have been upgraded will also
Be usable,
not need to be replaced.
But what proportion of the customer base, the HFC networks, have that?
That's part of the data we're assessing at the moment. I couldn't put a figure on it, Senator.
Okay, but not zero?
Not zero.
Some of it's already in there. When we were looking at the fibre to the premise rollout, you'd be installing devices at the customer end that had 4 ports, that you could potentially have 4 different retail service providers delivering different kinds of services into the home. If I'm plugged into the HFC network against my will, but if that is what is going to be delivered, will that same kind of terminated device at the household end be in place, or will I only be able to receive one service from one RSP?
It's one service.
That's a shame, isn't it? So that's kind of a structural disadvantage for people inside that footprint.
Well, we've seen already on our FTTP network with the number of active customers that the take-up of multiple service providers is very, very low. It's in, like 102% or 103% of active premises is the number of services in operation. So it does show that there's
I didn't understand that at all, sorry. What?
So if you look at
under 1%?
If you look at the number of active premises and then look at the number of active services, it's almost aligned 1-to-1. So it does suggest that even though they can, even in an FTTP world, get multiple service providers on one NTD, end users really don't have that need.
Not yet, okay. Is it possible then, imagining that you get your way and the HFC rollout, you somehow get access to those networks, you incorporate it into NBNco's back office systems and you light it all up, what's the upgrade path to full fibre to the premises in the future? Because we've dwelled a fair bit in past hearings on how you go from fibre to the node, you rip the nodes up, you connect the households to the exchange, and it's ugly, but there is an upgrade path there and other countries have done it. But what's the upgrade path for an HFC network to a full fibre to the premises network?
Without delving into the detail at this point in time, I don't understand that you can actually upgrade the network to full fibre to the premise.
That's my understanding too. But just to be clear, what that actually would look like in practice is dismantling and decommissioning the HFC cable and just running fibre all the way to the premise. You'd have to basically overbuild it. There'd be no elements of those networks that you'd be able to hold on to.
I believe there are fibre access points out there, but I can confirm that, and if you'd like, we can take it on notice and come back and confirm whether there is or is not an upgrade path.
You might need to speak a tiny bit louder, if you could. Sorry, I'm having trouble hearing. I just want to be really clear here. Is there anywhere in the world you could point to where anybody's taken an HFC network and upgraded it to a full fibre to the premise network, or do you just dismantle it and start again?
I could not point to anywhere in the world, but that might be a gap in knowledge.
It would certainly be a gap in mine.
And mine.
Yeah. Okay. My understanding is you just simply need to decommission it and start from scratch. So maybe by the next time we're together, which I guess will be early in the new year, you are expecting to have agreements signed. There may be undertakings made to the ACCC, and so we will know a little bit more about how this is going to work, if at all. About a year ago, NBNco bought IONet's Transact fibre to the premises network, just changing the subject briefly. Is that network now open to wholesale access?
I believe in the main it is. There might be some lagging, but in the main, Senator, I believe it is.
I would have thought that was either a kind of a yes or a no. What's the ambiguity?
Well, it was being. My understanding is it was being moved over to open access on a region by region basis.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying.
So in the main, yes, but there's some areas still being moved over.
Still doing that. Okay. I want to ask you then about fibre to the node customers extending fibre on demand all the way to the premise. this is one of the saddest things about what you guys are being forced to do, is that we've taken a network that would have been universal access and now are extending it to people who can afford to pay for it. Just tell us how that element of the plan is developing, and if I'm inside the HFC footprint and the product that I'll be receiving from NBNco by way of a retailer is going to be delivered over HFC, will there be any fibre on demand product that I can buy, or will that be off the market?
So we're currently working through what I would call our fibre on demand offerings, both what that means from a single dwelling or an area or an MDU. The first area, the first capability we're looking at is more what we would refer to as an area switch. So this might be where for commercial reasons or whatever reasons that the interested parties may want, they might be able to co-contribute for that upgrade. The fibre on demand product as a commercial capability we're working through, and we have not finalised that offering at this point.
Will there be a specific retail offering and a commercial offering? Like if I'm a householder with particularly high bandwidth requirements, will that be different to a product that I could get if I'm a small business?
Not really. It'd be the same thing. But if you wanted to, for example, upgrade more than a single premise or a single dwelling or a multi-dwelling and have multiple, that's what we would refer to as an area type switch.
Yeah. Okay. So you're anticipating still that those two things will be possible whether I'm inside the HFC footprint or not, if I'm kind of anywhere in the country, and just the price will vary?
I mean, clearly, depending on the architecture, that doing a fibre on demand upgrade to a single dwelling unit may be more difficult, but also I would argue the HFC and DOCSIS 3.1 speeds that are coming down when you start talking 100 and 200 and 300 megabits, we'd have to start looking at, rather than looking at the technology, look at the service that's required. So I think that the debate is not about the technology on demand, it's the service on demand that's being requested. So if you're getting 100, 200 or 300 megabits over the HFC, an upgraded HFC with DOCSIS capability, then it's probably unlikely that most residents are going to, a residential customer is going to need that type of upgrade.
Okay, I accept that. It's more likely that people stranded in the fibre to the node footprint are going to be the ones requesting fibre to the premise.
It could be. I mean, it all depends. You know, right now, if you look at where the data downloads and the usage trends, there's still ongoing technology advancements in FTTN with services like GFast and ongoing improvements in fibre to the distribution points, which makes that distance that you're using the last piece of copper shorter and shorter. So, yeah.
You've actually got to put fibre further into the suburbs to achieve those speeds. So there is an extra cost. When people just talk about GFast,
there is.
It's implied by some people who try and do this that you don't do anything else, it's like switching out the cards, but it's actually not. There's a construction involved in going deeper into pits outside homes, usually, just because that's where there's already holes.
I totally accept all those technologies work over shorter distances, so you need to get fibre to the most economic point and then to deploy that last piece. Yep.
What's the maximum length of last mile copper that you could have somebody hanging off then to deliver that kind of service?
And some of these new technologies, for their effectiveness, you're really talking sub 100 metres.
Okay, so that
might go to 200 metres.
That's down the end of the street. Yeah. You might as well just cable them all the way up. And so it was a statement, not a question. I'll move on. So there's no, I take it there were early lazy estimates that it would be $5,000 a premise floating around for fibre on demand. I don't know where they came from, but is that in the ballpark?
So we haven't, I can't comment on it. I don't know where that estimate came from, and we'll finalise that.
You guys have had well over a year. When are you likely to be able to announce some kind of product or offering?
First capability we should be announcing by the end of this calendar year, which will be area switch or MDU type upgrades, and then the fibre on demand single dwelling will be early in the following quarter.
Okay. This one, I've got a couple that might more properly rest with you, Minister. They're likely to be more political decisions than sort of stuff that we've been discussing so far around engineering. It's been reported that there are clauses in the Trans-Pacific Partnership that's under negotiation at the moment relating to state-owned enterprises. I don't know whether you're a party to that agreement, Senator Fifield. I suspect maybe you're not. But I'm very interested to know where NBNco stands in terms of government policy. There's apparently a list where governments that are signatories or proposed signatories to this agreement can quarantine state-owned enterprises and say, we want NBNco to be exempt from whatever clauses might apply under the TPP. Can you maybe confirm for us, firstly, whether that list exists, and if it does, whether you've placed NBNco on it?
Senator, I don't have any knowledge in relation to that area. I think, as I indicated to you when you asked me a similar question
about the ABC.
In relation to ABC and the Trans-Pacific Partnership, that obviously Minister Rob and the trade portfolio are the lead on negotiations in the Trans-Pacific Partnership. So I think probably the best I can do is take that on notice and if parts of it do need to be referred to the trade portfolio, which I suspect they will. Then we can ensure that happens.
All right. You're clear what I'm after specifically is where NBNco sits
sure.
Relative to this list, which is alleged. I mean, nobody's seen the text. I haven't. I suspect you may not have either. But it's being preceded by leaks that it does exist, and it would have a substantial and material impact on NBNco if that's the case, if it's on or off that quarantine list. So I want to, again, this question might go to government policy. Senator Fifield, can you outline for us the government's policy on the breakup or the sale, the privatisation, the part privatisation? What is the structure? What's this government's policy on the eventual structure of NBNco?
Look, Senator, I think it's best in relation to that if I refer that to Minister Turnbull. As you'd appreciate, as the Minister representing the Minister for Communications, I don't necessarily propose to speak on behalf of the Minister on policy matters. Where it might be most appropriate that I refer a question to him.
The two areas that I'm most interested in is how on earth you would, this is coming from the ACCC quite recently, how NBNco would accommodate competition at the wholesale layer. We have been through these debates at length over the last 6 years and eventually rested on a model where the market would let rip at the retail layer, but at the wholesale layer, NBNco would be the provider of last resort, if you like, providing universal access. So firstly, is it government policy that there should be some kind of competition at the wholesale layer where alternate HFC networks or wireless networks or God knows what would be competing for retail custom? Is that government policy?
Again, Senator, I'll take that on notice for Minister Turnbull.
Yeah. If it is government policy, I'd just be keen for any kind of illustration as to how on earth that would work. And the second element of the question is if NBNco is broken up, which its Act forbids at the moment, but if it was, and for example, the satellite business was spooled off as a separate entity, how much in the final network architecture where satellite represents, I think, 3% of your end of rollout total customer base, how much of a loss-making enterprise would that satellite business be if you spun it out into its own show?
I think there's multiple hypothetical questions.
That's not hypothetical. How much money would that entity lose?
There were some hypothetical questions in your submission.
I'll get really specific then. At the end of the rollout, when the satellite business is serving 3% of the customers right out in rural and remote Australia, how much money would that entity lose every year? Just because obviously being cross-subsidised by the other parts of the network. Anybody who wants to take that one's welcome.
I'll take it on notice. It would not be appropriate to try and estimate here.
Okay. Can you confirm for me that it would not, as a standalone entity, be a profit-generating business? there is zero
How
possibility.
much they gave it away for?
Certainly under the current pricing instructions, yes, it would be loss-making, Senator,
Yeah.
yes.
And you wouldn't be willing to hazard a guess as to how much?
Oh, Senator, you've asked a question as to in the distant future what it would lose.
It's not that distant. It's not that distant.
Sorry, I thought that's what you asked. What was your question? I'm sorry.
And by the end of the rollout, how much money would the satellite business lose if it was spun out as its own entity?
Senator, I don't have that detail here, and that would require some analysis.
Okay.
Senator Ludlam, I do hope you're not suggesting that we don't subsidise rural and regional
I'm actually
users.
very, very worried that that's what you're suggesting.
Yeah.
If you spin this entity out by itself, somebody's going to have to pay for it. That's precisely what I'm worried about.
Okay, well, I'm very happy that you're sitting on a looking after our rural and regional consumers and
I
customers.
think somebody may need to. Yeah.
Check the record.
Tell us about the wireless business. The whole idea of this universal open access network is that the big cities subsidise the bush. It's how post operates, it's how electricity and water and gas operate, and I think it's how telecommunications should operate. That's the principle on which the network was set up. If some of the ideologues who are circling this network have their way and spool these entities off to separate businesses, someone's going to have to pay for them. With the fixed wireless business serving 5% again of sort of rural and regional areas, if that was spun out to its own entity, would that be a loss-making enterprise?
Again, Senator, I don't have the details here. I'm just looking in the fixed wireless and satellite review. If you would give me some time, I may be able to find some
If you like,
financials in the review for you.
this is really my last question as to how on earth it's going to operate if it is broken up. So I'm happy to throw back to other senators while Mr. Roux checks those figures.